and actually applicable in gaming as well, we are entering an era where we can have what I describe as owner champions. So you have a fan, then you have a super fan, but now why not offer that fan or that gamer or that player the opportunity to actually be a co-owner in either that business or that royalty stream or whatever it is, right?
I'm just going to jump right in because I think you need to do the introduction of yourself as well, because when we met at the Pocket Gamer Awards the other night at dinner and we started chatting, I'm like, this is totally impromptu. This is not planned. Certainly wasn't on your schedule to say, okay, podcast impromptu at Gamescom, because James, what don't you do?
Yeah, what don't I do? Well, I don't know. I ask myself that all the time. So in terms of an introduction, my name's James Hursthouse. I've been in the games industry for I used to like to say 20 years, but now I have to say 25.
Okay. But you're an OG then.
Well, I suppose so, yeah.
It's a badge of honor to say that.
Yeah, I mean, in gamer since I was 7 years old, which was
wow,
early 70s.
Okay.
And, I think I got an Atari console for Christmas. I can't remember, either 7 years old, 8 years old, something like that.
Okay.
And so since then, I've always just been fascinated by games and interactive, and kind of really got into the industry in 2000, I would say. My degree in the late 80s was actually in philosophy.
Oh, I've got one of those.
Oh, have you? Philosophy? Yeah, well,
philosophy of science.
And mine was specifically computational model of the mind, right? So at the time, obviously, AI was theoretical to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Turing machines made out of wood, and will this piece of wood ever become self-aware, or will it be able to start to think, and all this kind of stuff?
Teaching gloves.
Yeah, no, exactly. All of that stuff, right? And so where we are now in 2025 is really fascinating for having that background. But that's definitely the reason why, throughout my life, I kind of got drawn, I guess, initially to MMOs and was always a gamer. And so I moved to Japan from the UK in 1993, thinking I'd go for a year or two with the aim of learning Japanese to kind of carry on my studies. But one thing led to another, and that led to 2 kids and then 17 years in Japan. And then I was very lucky, actually. I got to sidestep into the games industry proper in around 2000. Because originally I'd gone over to teach, and then I ended up working for the English language teaching publishers like Oxford University Press and stuff like that. Yeah. But a buddy of mine said, hey, I've got a guy in Nihonbashi that wants to learn English every morning. Would you like to teach him? And so I said, yeah, sure. And it turned out it was, at the time, Nexon had a joint venture with a company in Japan. So it was the Japanese CEO of that company. And then very quickly he says, okay, after about 3 months, why don't you do the international biz dev? Then I won't have to learn English. And so that's kind of how it started. So he sent me over to GDC 2003. Okay. And a lot of the people who were in the bar at the San Jose Fairmont, when the entire industry used to fit in the bar at the San Jose Fairmont, still part of the network today.
Oh, yeah.
And still doing work with a bunch of those guys, and seeing some of them over the last few days, right? So as a result of that, it's been half of my career has been infrastructure in the early days.
That's why I connected with you, because yes, gaming from the very start, but you've been bringing it to, I wouldn't say another level, don't want to go to a pun here, but, understanding what do we want in a game? What's the level of ownership that we want in a game? What is the level of engagement that we want with all the objects around the game? So games, commerce, experience, metaverse before it was cool.
Well, sure.
Metaverse before it was cool.
Yeah, and I think what is interesting actually is, when I moved over to Vancouver in 2010 to start the studio, obviously sort of Vancouver as a location has a lot to thank Electronic Arts for, right? So a lot of the people in Vancouver have had that, like, I would say, typical Western kind of, in the early days of gaming in Western markets, it was obviously all, physical device.
Yeah.
In the early day, tapes, and then obviously CDs and then DVDs and stuff. But having grown up in gaming in Asia, I feel pretty lucky because obviously, free to play really found its feet in Asia. I remember Kart Rider being invented. I remember the vitriol from Western developers around free to play, which now kind of reminds me of like Web3 and stuff like this. So I think not having had that Western lens in the early part of my career was quite lucky, because I can continue to sort of look for innovation. I think a lot of innovation
Exactly.
still coming out of, South Korea, Japan, China now, and other markets, right? So,
but you're also viewing gaming as a form of entertainment, which it is. We know that already, but
yeah,
it's
100%.
like gaming, music, film, icons
Yeah, for sure.
are not part of any one platform.
Yeah,
So
not
tell me a
anymore.
little bit about what you're doing there, because I thought that was fascinating, of bringing, the whole idea that there are objects, I won't preempt it because I want you to tell your story,
Right,
but
sure.
we collect. It's in our DNA, and that's what's proven through everything we collect in a game. But
Yeah.
you're bringing other aspects of entertainment into that realm, which I think is very
Sure.
smart, very smart.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you take a step back, so the online games guys, I mean, we always used to gather in Austin every year, and there was sort of the early stage of MMOs for the Austin Game
Yes.
Conference and things like this, right?
Yes.
So I think online gaming in particular was really good sort of formative breeding ground for a lot of the stuff that's happening more broadly now. So back in 2007, I think it was, a group of us got together and we wrote a white paper called the Metaverse Roadmap. And I think Neil Stevenson had coined the term probably 1997, 96. I can't remember. So I think Snow Crash was the first utilization of the term metaverse, right?
Yeah.
So 10 years after that, for us, it was, okay, we sort of
Yeah.
understand metaverse. Second Life had recently started.
Yeah.
And so in the Metaverse Roadmap, we kind of identified 6 pillars of the future,
Mhm.
one of which was absolutely convergence, right? So we kind of knew that entertainment formats would converge.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure that we knew that, for example, the power of the game engines, like I think Unity and Unreal, and obviously as Unreal's now moved into virtual production, and you don't really make movies these days without Unreal. And so this whole idea of a shared pipeline of assets, and obviously until GPUs were of a power that could manipulate those in game. But yeah, I think all along, we sort of saw that as a necessary, I wouldn't say end game, because obviously the story's not fully written yet, but having done work, for example, blending music with gaming, and then games with films and books with films. And now I just sort of think the idea of having to restrict your access to an IP through only one doorway or one window into that IP is kind of restrictive, right? So I think the best IPs that are out there now, and, they are definitely cross-media.
Yeah.
And obviously
you're trying to bring some new perspective, new life, new attention to these. And even a couple where I was like, yeah, do it, James, because I'll buy into it. How exciting.
Yeah.
Photography, for example.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah. Well, so that's a project, it's interesting because aside from games, I mean, obviously we've still got interesting games. And a lot of what we're doing, like specifically in gaming at the moment, is things like instant access play, trying to make it more accessible for a regular person to play gaming, right? There was a friend of mine actually the other night, last night, talking about, Maiden on console. It has 5 million, sells 5 million regularly, but there's actually 400 million fans of the NFL. So what are the other 395 million doing, right?
Yeah.
So I think partly their access to gaming is hampered by either the console purchase or maybe for whatever reason, right? And so I think in our day-to-day life, when it comes to helping the games industry, we're talking about now instant play, being able to click a link and get straight into a game.
Yeah, cloud is
using
going
it.
to
So
be
yeah, cloud game
incredible.
streaming basically.
Yes.
And obviously then there's things around user registration and ethical data and all this kind of stuff. But aside from that, yeah, we've got some projects more in the Web3 space, sort of stemming back to the work that we did with Iron Maiden on Legacy of the Beast.
Well, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that was an interesting
our
project.
audience doesn't know about it. We had the pleasure of sitting next to each other, so we could chat about it.
Yeah. Well, so Legacy of the Beast was a great thing. I mean, I'd been a fan of the band since I was 12, I guess, maybe 11, something like that. I first saw Maiden, I think, when I was 13.
Yes.
Which is a long time ago now. But then saw them recently in June at the 50th anniversary show at West Ham in London, which was an amazing experience, right? Because still as great as ever. But to get to work with the band and sort of see how interactive and the stories and all these sorts of things would fit in and their willingness. So for example, Legacy of the Beast was the first time that a major artist toured a video game, not an album, right? So we're very proud of that. And we knew that, it was going to be associated with the tour. So we kind of had a 2-year extension because of the pandemic, right? Things like this. But I think, seeing how music fans would then start to come into gaming, and all this kind of stuff was very instructive. So what we're doing now, and I can't go into too much detail, but there are things like music publishing rights or music royalties. There are things like ownership of photography collections, right? And so
that's a smart one.
Well, so anytime that you've got something that generates royalties, now with new Web3 frameworks and smart contracts, sometimes security tokens, stable coins, all of these kinds of things, and actually applicable in gaming as well, we are entering an era where we can have what I describe as owner champions. So you have a fan, then you have a super fan, but now why not offer that fan or that gamer or that player the opportunity to actually be a co-owner in either that business or that royalty stream or whatever it is, right? So obviously, things like fractional real estate, tokenization of real estate, that's been happening for a while. BlackRock will say that basically the entire world, every single asset in the entire world is going to be on chain eventually, because it's that much more convenient to manage and all these kinds of things. But for me, tokenizing a relatively faceless apartment building in somewhere, it's not that exciting, right?
And exciting,
no, exactly. But if you can own something that you're passionate about, the sort of data shows that owner champions twice as likely to engage, twice as likely to evangelize, they spend that much more. And so I think that there's this new sort of synergistic relationship between fan and artist, or between gamer and studio, or and some of that's coming out now, obviously, with the amount of user generated content that you see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's a great new paradigm.
And you saw it coming. We were chatting about that because I was like, what Felly said. And you're like, yes. And I have it in my deck. And I was absolutely blown away. And I thought, this is it.
Yeah.
Everything goes around full circle, but you're taking it one level further than that, because I think we've gone through our Web3 and our Metaverse, whining at the first time, because it was blown. What can I say?
Well, it was, but
it was blown, but now it's back.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mentioned free to play earlier, right? So again, people of a certain age will remember Western game conferences where the vitriolic negative reaction to free to play in its early days.
It's not a real game.
Right.
It's
not a real game. It's just a Ponzi scheme, right? So and obviously Web3 kind of, I guess, was blown up from that. I think because obviously in the modern world, the ability for something to go viral for good or for bad, it's obviously free to play. Like the debate around free to play, I think, was kind of restricted to game developers, whereas I think the debate around Web3 has been much more public, right?
Yeah.
And obviously I think certain people, probably more people, have been burned by the first phase of Web3 than they were in free to play. I don't know, but I think, you're right. I mean, so I think it's taken a while for it to find its feet. And I think if you look at what's really going on now in sort of what I would say is either the second phase or third phase of Web3, some people are calling it Web 4, maybe Web 5, Web 6. When do we get there? But I mean, I think there's a ton of stuff that came out from those early experiments, which will genuinely kind of revolutionize everything. Well, inform everything. Actually, in the same way that free to play has informed a lot of non-gaming interactions.
True.
So
look at something like a Duolingo. I mean, it's gamification.
100%. Duolingo's gamified.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost everything is, to a certain degree, though. You get Expedia points, and so how do you sort of now address a generation that's grown up with the engagement and the retention and all these kinds of things from games, and they sort of expect that genuinely. And so, as always, though, for me, I look to South Korea or other parts of Asia, and if you see the way that certain games companies have started to integrate Web3, it's not like in the West where it was like a big baseball bat going, hey, buy tokens, hey, have a wallet. It's kind of much more.
Please have our wallet or that wallet or which wallet.
This wallet, and all that confusing stuff.
Yes.
So what they did there, though, they've introduced, kind of, because if you think about it, back 2004, 2005, whatever, lots of players were getting ripped off trying to sell characters on the gray market. They were trying to trade tokens or in-game currency, right?
Yeah.
Incidentally, another one of the
everyone had an NFC.
Well, 100%. So another, one of the pillars of the future in 2007 was true digital ownership, right? So we recognized that players wanted to feel invested in a game, right? And
but I think we went about it the wrong way. We knew they wanted to have NFTs or something like that.
Right.
But as you said, it was a bit of a hard sell.
Well, but I mean, if you think about having to sell your character on eBay to make money, how many, people got ripped off? Companies didn't make any money from that, right? So if you look at the sort of a genuine utilization of Web3 tech, it kind of allows that behavior to become legitimate. players feel like they've invested genuinely, right? So, like a game like, for example, Night Crows from We Made, if you see the stats between the non-Web3 version and the Web3 version, the Web3 components don't come in until much later in the game. But once you have that hardcore player base, that genuine sense of ownership does extend the game. It increases retention. Certainly when you look at like day 180, day 365, the fact that people feel
you're
invested.
Bringing it in later in the journey. That makes total sense. Later in the journey,
right. And so it's after the player is already engaged. Yeah. And now you can say, hey, wouldn't you like to genuinely own this character? Or, hey, wouldn't you like to have sort of invested? And so things like staking and things like some of the more esoteric Web3 stuff is introduced in a way that feels natural within that game, right? Rather than it being the game's kind of like an excuse for a tokenomics scheme, right? So I think finding that balance is really important. And, there's a lot of, developers globally now who have kind of, I think, realized that that's, at least in gaming, that's the right way to do it, right? Now, in something like, fractionalizing ownership of a photography archive, even more important that we don't talk about wallet and, staking and gobbledygook and all of this kind of like, all of these arbitrage, all of the terms that I think Web3 did such a poor job in. I mean, even the word NFT, right?
Yeah. NFT
why
is
can't
also...
digital ownership certificate, or I think there's a whole ton of other words that we can use that would make it a lot more accessible, right? So anyway, so that's kind of like the universe that I'm existing in at the moment. And as far as gaming in particular is concerned, it is around this sort of new paradigm of, influencers being able to directly promote their own games through instant links. How are we going to bill? Obviously there's been a stranglehold or whatever on the industry by the platforms. And that's not to say that they haven't served a great purpose, right? I mean, a lot of people are out there going, oh, what did Apple ever do for its 30%? And I think the answer actually is they did a lot, right? Because they did the distribution piece, they do the build. So
are you good about alternative app stores? Are you excited? Is that something that's going to be a driver here?
Oh, for sure.
Or that they'll have web shops, or, shops you're going to have to merch, right?
Web shops, yeah. I mean, yes. And obviously, in a way, this has been the last couple of years have been the years of the web shop, particularly since the Apple Epic sort of court case found its, at least a temporary conclusion. I don't know if that's the end of the story, but for sure. I think, in my opinion, the more choice, the more access, the more ease with which that 395 million user base of NFL fans can now access gaming or games of some description, the better it's going to be for the entire industry. Although it'll mean that these halls will get more and more packed on an ongoing basis, right? But so, but anyway, I mean, so I think that it's a very exciting future. And I still think that whole idea of, does the game spawn the movie? Does the movie spawn the game? Yeah. And obviously we're entering this amazing world now of AI supercharged user-generated content.
Yeah, so I was talking to Goat Gaming, another great episode I did, and the community manager is AI, right? And the cool thing is that when the manager, who is Amy, right? When Amy does an activation or a contest or a tournament, it is engagement is off the charts.
Right.
It's like 2x of when a human does it. I don't know if that's good or bad news for us, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And you saw some of this in what you were writing about. I mean, how much of that, when we talked about, ownership, and we are definitely on the same wavelength on, like Bowie was right.
Yeah, Bowie bonds and all that stuff.
Bowie bonds ahead of their time. No one will know this out there, but we do. And it was on the market. It was so wild at the time.
Shall we just do a quick explanation of Bowie bonds?
Yes, let's do that, because you're right. Okay. They won't know it.
So David Bowie, obviously always a massive innovator, right? There's interviews with Bowie about the internet in general, which will blow your mind if you go find them, right?
Yes.
And I feel very fortunate, obviously, passed away a number of years ago, but we have touch points into Bowie and sort of some of those iconic innovators, right, with some of the work we're doing, which feels amazing. But anyway, so Bowie was very prescient in that he recognized, whatever, I can't remember, I think it was the sort of late 90s where he said, okay, I'm going to be making a certain amount of royalty over the next 20 years. I'm going to pre-sell that royalty. So he basically sold these things called Bowie bonds.
Yes.
Which you could buy, and as a result of that, you would then have an ownership stake in David Bowie's future royalties, right?
Right.
Now, if that had been on
credit card, the Bowie card.
Oh, exactly. All of these things.
Yeah,
amazing, right? Yeah. So that whole idea of having an ownership stake in an artist that I love and respect, and obviously it would have been much more easy if it was on chain, smart contract would have been allowing to be more sophisticated. But in a way, the core premise of being able to have ownership in that artist was really, I think, Bowie's invention. There's a couple of other examples as well, right? Anyway, sorry, what were we talking about?
So I was talking about what you were writing about.
Oh yeah, the 6 pillars of the future.
That's a while back, that blog.
Well, it was, yeah. Well, it was
I'm going to read it.
Well, 2007, we did the Metaverse Roadmap.
Yeah.
And then earlier this year, I decided to go back and look at each of the pillars of the future and see where we were at, right?
Okay.
So obviously true digital ownership morphed into blockchain crypto.
Okay, so we nailed that one. Where are we on the others? So we've got that one.
Well, user-generated content, I think we saw that because obviously at the time, Second Life was really pioneering in user-generated content. Pain in the ass so it was to actually make anything. True. I remember in Second Life, I had my character and I managed to put a billboard like intersecting my head, and for months I was walking around with this half-finished billboard in my head. So, I mean, I think now, obviously with AI and the sort of / I'd like a world based on whatever, I mean, it's going to be so much easier for content creators, whether they're professional, whether they're sort of UGC level, fans, to engage in that process, right? And I think the whole thing is, how do you take, 1 million people and have them make $100 each, rather than 100 people making $1 million each? Maybe that's an extreme, but maybe 100,000 and 10,000 anyway, whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think that's where the very prescient guys who are now starting to put licensing deals that you can just pick and choose off the shelf, say in Roblox, right? If you saw that number of Squid Game things in Roblox, incredible, right? So that relationship again between IP, creator, vibe coded games.
They add value to the creation.
Yeah,
it
totally.
Makes sense.
Totally. And then I don't think, back in 2007, I think we just started looking at things like auto difficulty adjustments. I mean, maybe not, maybe I'm being a little bit, rose colored spectacles with that, but there was definitely a phase where we started to introduce auto difficulty adjustment in gaming. So, obviously if the player they haven't pushed a button for 15 seconds, we better give them some help, or this guy's clearly an expert and he or she should therefore get a slightly harder version of the game. But now I think, if you look at AI, you can be like, okay, let me build this game once, and the level of customization that we're going to be able to do
is unimaginable.
It's incredible, really, right?
Yeah.
And I think again, well, and then some of that stuff then once again feeds back into the technology that we're going to need to be able to distribute those games where it's not actually been made in advance, right? I think we're going to see quite a lot of sort of
on spec.
Well, sort of, and not only necessarily with fans making stuff, but they will. But then also, I think that this, I'm working on a couple of projects now where it's kind of like there's a game master, and the game master is going to sort of basically create new chapters for these stories over time. Well, yeah, it's a lot like D&D, yeah.
Like rolling the dice. It goes around.
Well, because now it's not going to take 6 months to build a new level for a game, right? You can be like, okay, as long as I've got a player base.
And you have a narrative and a story, you have it.
Well, and also polling the players, right? What do the players want, right?
Yeah.
And, I think that sort of more symbiotic relationship between the developer and the player base is really going to come into its own, because the means of production are now that much easier, right? So, so that's a very interesting piece. So what we got? We got true digital ownership. We got UGC. We definitely sort of figured that one.
Yeah.
Ubiquitous compute, which we've already touched on with cloud game streaming. So we know a lot of word now.
Okay.
So that one's there. What else did we have? Can't even remember now. There's a couple of others. But anyway, so with the blog, it'll come back to me in a bit. So blog earlier this year, I decided rather than waiting 20 years till 2027,
right,
it just felt like the time was right to go in and look at some of these sort of,
I'm glad you did.
Where were we at, right? And that's really informing what we're doing, particularly at Greenstone at the moment. We're kind of like sort of
so
spanning
what is Greenstone? It's like a connector.
Well, kind of, yeah. I mean,
orchestrator is what I was thinking.
I like to, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I call it super connector.
Okay, so I saw that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, and
super connector. I go with that.
And I like business development as a service, because if you say it quickly, it's badass, right? So I like badass super connector, but
I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I mean that's
badass super connector.
But so what I'm finding is, you need sort of, whenever you look at some of the tools providers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because obviously first half of my career was much more infrastructure, server hosting, like pre-cloud, how do you deliver big MMOs in sort of, 2004, 5, whatever it was, right? And obviously that got easier with cloud, although, certain advantages, and there's still a lot of bare metal guys around, right? But,
right.
I think as you sort of look at this distribution piece, it then creates other challenges, right? So, Obviously, at the moment, as you try and put together a player base, a lot of that is because, people can sniff the device, you get the device ID. But if my game is now happening in a server, 20 miles away, there are new challenges around creating that player database. How do you collect ethical data?
Yes.
And
so this is going to be creative, and it's going to create tools.
Well, for sure. I mean, I think the tools have to kind of morph to match current environment. And then to a certain degree, I think sometimes the tools come along and then they help define what innovations the creative can make, right? And so I think, it's always been a case that I would say that creative always has to come first. And anybody that builds tools and platforms just for the sake of it, without solving a genuine problem or having recognized a shift from the content side, that's kind of like a fool's errand, really. And you'll end up making tech that's brilliant, but nobody wants it, right? Which we've seen 100 times.
Zero wealth of business model ideas. Is there one that you felt was a miss, or you were super excited about something and it didn't turn out that way?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I think, it's often said that it's worse to be too early than too late with something, right? And, I guess,
There you go, James. You've been too early, but it's catching up with you. But what are you the most excited about right now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a few things. I do think that this convergence, we haven't really seen what convergence necessarily means yet with some really cool IPs. I do think that we're sort of at if it hasn't happened already, we're certainly at the dawn of an era where we could have, a 3-person team make $1 billion game. And I think that's pretty interesting, right?
That's good news for our indies out there.
Well, for sure it is. I mean, and actually, I think, although, again, I think, what's going to happen is that people will figure out AI tools to be able to kind of sort of take the risk out of that development.
Yeah.
Okay, what type of genre for which audience? And I've done enough data scraping to sort of know that this thing's going to be a hit. And, kind of like these sorts of things. But I always think there is room for indie creativity, right? Because it's outside of that, kind of the framework of the norm.
And it moves faster.
Right, moves faster. And now I think that the means of production are that much more accessible to more people, right? So ultimately, creativity is the thing that's going to win.
Yeah. Well, it's good that human creativity matters.
Human creativity. Well, yeah, and also
there's a place for the humans. Absolutely.
I do think that there will be a sort of wave of games where bots are playing bots, and I don't know, it's going to be.
And we'll watch them.
We'll probably wager on them. We'll probably use the blockchain to wager on bots fighting bots or something like that. But hopefully, then when the alien force comes, we'll have trained up the bots to be able to fight them in real, like Ender's Game or something like that. But
love it.
Yeah, so all that stuff's very exciting. And then for me personally, I don't know. I mean, I keep liking this idea of taking what we know from the games industry in terms of engaging an audience and then retaining an audience and then actually monetizing an audience, but monetizing them in a fair and ethical way, right?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff we're doing at the moment is much more about how does a player or a fan feel valued in the relationship rather than harvested, right? So interesting stuff around ethical data. How do you make it so that the player can revoke permission for the company to access data at any time? So I think we lived through this kind of slightly Wild West era of data scraping. And, obviously, to a certain degree, Facebook wouldn't be Facebook if they hadn't gone down that path, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's time now for everybody to kind of be part of a more egalitarian future, right? So whether that happens or not, I'm not sure. But I do think a democratized sort of egalitarian future was the real promise of Web3.
It's almost like
right.
It's inescapable. Like that genie is out of the bottle.
I hope so. Well, then, you mentioned ultimate personalization. And if we are going to permit the world to use the term Web4, that's what it's about. It's the personalization layer that AI brings. So it's your health program, it's your game, it's your music, it's what you want to do. It's like, the world kind of morphs around you.
You co-create your experiences.
No, exactly.
That's going back away as well.
Well, I mean, and already there's always been that sense now, I think, with distribution sort of having been solved, right? I mean, and again, for indie creators, the idea of if they have a great game and they've got enough viralness, enough word of mouth, there's no reason why it can't go to millions and millions of people, right? Because, and that's why I think, to go back to that conversation about the stranglehold of the platforms.
Yeah.
The fact that isn't there anymore.
That's ending.
Yeah, and I think they'll be in the mix. Of course, they're going to be in the mix, right? But
they'll be there. I'm going to stay connected with you, James,
because
that's great.
I appreciate it.
Very much enjoyed our discussion at dinner and here again for Pocket Gamer and in the future, because you have a look into that future, James. You do.
Well,
you do. You don't give yourself credit, but I was listening to you, and it's like, you can't have that many hits and that few misses in looking at the future from 2007 to now. So I have to say, you are an OG, and I am happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been a real pleasure. I mean, both today and at the dinner as well. And I will say Pocket Gamer Mobile Games Awards is one of the events of the show.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah, in future, everybody has to go down there and support the mobile games industry. Because what was it? 51% of all games are now mobile.
Yes.
So it's the dominant form that doesn't get the credit.
Yeah. And a lot of spend. So
it
is a business. The business of games. Indeed. Great to chat with you, James. This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@PocketGamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the PocketGamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at PocketGamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the PocketGamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the PocketGamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future.